So we just heard about Unilever, and in fact, my case study is also about Unilever. So we would like to showcase how lighthouse projects can be stitched together to actually uh, create decarbonization pathways and then implement it and see the actionables in interacting to lower your carbon emissions. So first, let me put a perspective in place because it's really important that to create awareness about the numbers, what we are looking at when we are talking about a decarbonization era, which is supposed to come. So let's look at the numbers very quickly. So this is a campus in Whitefield over here, which is a global R&D center for Unilever. Across Unilever, we've been working for multiple campuses to drive their decarbonization journey. Before we go into the case study, I would just like to throw some big picture in front of you so that each one of you is aware what could be the pathways which we'll need to follow, because this is how the agenda looks like. What is the challenge in front of us as far as numbers go globally? What are the pathways or what could be lifted as a takeaway for each one of you over here as three quick takeaways in three quick slides? That is what I've tried to do to put the entire perspective. And then we will look at the picture story of Unilever. I'm not going to talk a lot about the numbers or the efforts which we put in, but pictures will speak for themselves. Let's look over here where today, if you see the scenario today, we are consuming 36,800 terawatt hours of energy across the globe, the entire real estate sector or the built environment sector. And what if we are going to do the net zero building transition, we will at 2050 be at only 40,000 terawatt hours. Now, what is going to drive that reduction in the overall consumption of the terawatt hour units? If you'll see, the projected 33,700 units terawatt hours of electricity can come down to 17,500. So that is where our net focus would be. As everybody said in the morning, that operational energy is the major source of carbon emission reductions, which we should be targeting at. So here is a small playbook which actually tells us that energy productivity can lower electricity demand by technical efficiency improvements. So there are a large scale improvements which can happen in the sector. Second is building a better building fabric. So if you work on the facades at the design stage for existing buildings or for new buildings, you are going to achieve high amounts of improvement. And third is, very importantly, as spoken by Jaggi, that behavioral choices will drive the energy efficiency down. That why do I require my air conditioning, or why can't I adopt to adaptive comfort of comfort air conditioning instead of having always electricity based air conditioning? So these are the three major areas. Now let's look at one more very important fact, that 12.3 gigaton of CO2 emissions are coming from this sector alone in 2022. 26% overall, which is around 33% of the global emissions as we discussed in the morning today, out of which the 33%, 26% is only because of operational energy. So you need to understand that the entire operational energy value chain needs to be looked at very carefully, because it is almost 75 to 80% of the overall emissions from our built environment sector. So that is the big number which we should be looking at. The second big number is 7%, which is out of the 33, 26 is gone in the operational, and remaining 7 is coming from the 5 billion square meter, which is getting added year on year in the sector, in the built environment sector. So we are adding 5 billion square meter of space across the globe. As we saw, 1 billion square feet in India itself is getting added. So this number is really important because we need to decarbonize this number as well. Plus, there is an additional beyond 33%. What we are doing is adding another 6%, with our infrastructure. Roads are getting built, networks are getting built, we are continuously creating campuses. So another 6% is getting added over there. So approximately close to 38-39% of the overall emissions in the built environment sector, this is the breakup. So it's really important to put numbers into perspective as we move ahead. We all know this. It's just a refresher that there is an upfront phase where we are looking at product and its extraction, transportation, production, and then it gets transported to site during construction and the building gets constructed. There is a maintenance and use phase where we are focused that most of the operational emissions actually get consumed, and then there is an end of life phase. So each of the phases is distinct and we should know the numbers, the big picture over here as well. Let's look at this. What's going to happen? Yes. Now, if we look at the global footprint, the entire built environment sector is going to produce. At 2022, we were at 250 billion square meters of constructed space. And by 2050, we are going to be at 390. We are going to add 140 billion square meter of space, and which means embodied carbon and the infrastructure supporting that. Every bit of it is going to add embodied carbon and the overall emission is going to increase. So this is another challenge in front of us, that we are continuously expanding the global footprint of our square meter space across the globe. Now, where it is going to get maximum impacted? In countries like developing nations. So we will see the split. If we hadn't taken any action, for example, just going back, yes, if we don't take any action, then almost with no action, new floor area could produce 75 tons of carbon, gigatons of carbon. But if we were to take action, that would reduce from 75 to 30. That is why it is an imperative that all of us should understand the construction cycle, the embodied carbon cycle, and go towards low carbon embodied materials for our construction. Let's look at the other number, other big picture. Yes. Now, what's happening is, we, as rightly said by Jaggi in the morning when we were talking about the prestige portfolio, something needs to be done on the residential portfolio as well. Because if you see the big numbers, the large numbers, 16% of the entire floor space is actually residential and only 10% is the commercial. So in fact, the residential carbon emissions are much more than the commercial. But our effort and our focus is towards only looking at commercial. This gives a clear picture that residential also needs a clear focus area, that how to reduce the emissions over here. And what is happening is, across the globe, heating, we thought that cooling was the big source of carbon emission. But the global numbers, the IEA numbers showcase that heating is one of the biggest contributors towards the carbon emissions. So that is where the focus should lie, although only 3% is from the cooling side. But this is going to change, because as we expand the building floor space, the cooling demand is also shooting up. We have folks, the ACREX event is focused towards net zero, which is happening in the city of Bangalore. We will see what are the pathways we all can take towards that. Let's look at this now. Imagine where the construction is happening, where the build space is getting built out. If you'll see 250 billion square meter of space in 2022 going to 390, there is a 55% increase in the overall floor space which we are building over the next 20 years, which is a major leap. But do you understand that 100% of this space expansion is coming from countries like us, Brazil, Mexico, the BRIC nations? That is where the most of the action is happening. So 100% expansion in the middle and low income countries. China is actually slowed down. There is only 25% growth happening in the rest of the 30 years in China. And surprisingly, there are newer dimensions in Europe, USA, and the other developing high income countries which will still continue to grow. But if you see, the highest impact is going to be delivered by our nations like India and the BRIC nations. So that is where the focus of decarbonization should lie. So this tells us this story. Now, again, if you see the distinction between the commercial and residential on to your right, 250 billion square meter to 390, both are growing simultaneously. There is no stoppage in the growth of commercial and residential. So our focus cannot be only commercial buildings. There has to be a very deep and dedicated focus in going from B to C to the last end user who's going to consume the apartments, who's going to stay at these apartments and be responsible for decarbonizing the economy. Let's look at this now. This is a very, very serious number which we all should be aware about, that, you know, out of the gross floor space of 150 billion square meter, over the next 30 years, it will reach only 200, which is the red color band, which is the heating demand. So heating demand is actually slowing down, but the cooling demand is growing drastically up. So there is a 150% growth demand in the cooling sector, which is happening from 100 billion square meter of floor space. We are going to be going to 250. So imagine the decarbonization challenge we have, because rapid growth, exponential growth in air conditioning, and we are still not sure where the renewables or where the grids are going to interact to reduce the decarbonization requirements, because it is still not very flexible. As we know, it's still very rigid, and everything is still coal dependent or fossil fuel based dependencies there. So this is only going to enhance the challenge of decarbonization. So with this background, let's look at what could be the pathways. This is one quick slide which everyone can take away, and this could be a probable pathway that we all are looking at as we move towards a decarbonized economy. So look at both the sides. One is residential and one is commercial. And what we are looking at is key technologies innovation. So across renewable electricity generation, which is now started happening in India, we all know as consultants, as stakeholders, that we can get renewable energy from a faraway destination into the grid and serve our buildings and assets. But this needs to be taken across the region. So it is not only Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, or key cities, but it should happen throughout India. These policies should support that. How can we get off-site renewable energy into the building asset which we are occupying? Also look at, there is no trend of using high performance windows in residential demand, which is really driving the energy numbers high. We should all understand that there is a huge potential, which we will see in the Unilever case study, huge potential to look at high performance facades and windows. Then most of it, solar, we know the space is limited, so we need to maximize it to the highest demand, and then look at electrification of everything. I would say hot water electrification through heat pumps, electrification of cooking, everything needs to be electrified. There should be no natural gas or other gas elements doing the cooking as well. Insulation, again, we've heard about a concept called passive house in the Europe, but in India, do we really focus on insulation in our homes? We are doing more and more Maiwan, and more heat is coming inside. So there has to be a foam-based system or an insulated system which will keep the energy outside, keep the heat outside, and allow our buildings to cool. That is the first principle which was used in Unilever case study, which we will show. On the commercial, again, we all know energy and daylight keep on imbalancing each other, or they need to be balanced. In the quest for higher and higher daylight, glare might come in and may heat up the building. So it has to be a fine balance of glare getting reduced, only adequate daylight coming in, and high performance envelope doing the energy optimization. And then look at a smart M&V energy system. This is lacking currently. We don't see data of buildings in the public domain. which will help us to baseline, benchmark, and improve. So we all know that it is only voluntary right now, the data submission on the numbers part. But there has to be a stage where the maturity has to occur, where every building might get incentives if they disclose their data. So that is really important also. And the grid also needs to become flexible to have various kinds of integrated technologies into the system. Like right now, we know that the grid can just trip. It is very, very rigid. It cannot just be flexible. Let's look at one more. So this is a first we saw that for the operational energy use. Now I'm showing this for the embodied carbon energy use. What could be the pathway? On to the extreme bottom right hand side, this is the pathway to look at embodied carbon. Use more and more timber, bamboo, hempcrete, rammed earth. Three conditions for bio-based materials. It should be sourced sustainably. It should store carbon while in the building and not emit carbon. And it should be dealt with properly at the end of life. So these are the three stages where building decarbonization across the embodied footprint can happen. Now, 3 steps to do it. Okay, I think somewhere the quest to build lesser ratios, like to build a compact wall-to-wall ratio and not have a very high ratio, is coming back, which is really a good news for all of us over here. So if we are going to build 70, 80, 90% WWR, that is not going to serve us. So we should be looking at somewhere around 20 to 30%. The tropical climate requirements suit us over there. And that is how we will be able to look at the embodied carbon in a very nice and gentle way. This is on embodied carbon, the pathway. Now let's look at one more pathway, which is very interesting. Okay, this I'm not taking because it is on existing buildings. So we spoke about existing buildings, but I don't want to talk about it. Yes, now imagine that what is the scenario? We spoke about a 150% increase in global cooling demand across the world. But there are 3 stages which can be looked at. You are going to require 2.5x times more energy if no action was taken. The demand for cooling in 2022 was 2,100 terawatt hours. And if no action is taken, it will rapidly jump to 3,100. This will decelerate the decarbonization effort, not accelerate. So this is where the focus should lie. What is going to happen is overall 5,200, there are suitable amount of 3 steps which we can take. Efficiency improvements, that is where the drive is, like how can we keep on improving the efficiency of equipment day in and day out. This will bring down the demand to 2,600 units of terawatt hours will be reduced, and 1,500 units can only be reduced by building optimization of the building envelope, retrofit for passive cooling, and other choices. Behavioral choices also play a very important role over here. This is going to help us to accelerate the decarbonization effort. 2,100 terawatt hours is the 2022 consumption. If we follow this pattern, these steps, it will reduce to 1,200. That is the effort which all of us over here need to take towards decarbonization acceleration. So this is what the humble request is, that let's try and look at this awareness session as your starting point for accelerating decarbonization. Yes, so now let's look at Unilever. We just spoke about Unilever over here. So there are suitable, this entire playbook which has been put up over here previously, the big numbers to create awareness, then the pathways shown to you, it's all applied over here. That is why we can see the results. So what we believe as part of the Tata Group at EcoFirst, we always think very scientifically. So there has to be evidence and numbers to support each and every bit of work which we are doing. And that is what the story tells us about. There is only pictures. I haven't done anything. Most of my talks are all extempore, so I never prepare. So I can just tell you a picture story. So this is a beautiful garden, I would say. And the building is inside the garden. So that is what the decarbonization story is all about in the city of Bangalore at Whitefield. So let's look at it. What is it going to drive? Today's session is going to drive. So this is a context setting for all of you. How can we develop a shared set of values and metrics so that the building stakeholder ecosystem can benefit? How do we design, construct, and operate such buildings which will be not only attractive and productive for the occupants, but it also addresses the triple bottom line? And third is, what will enable high performance? We saw efficiency improvements, better fabric, so all that will drive. And how can we transform building stock to high performance? We saw the entire story since morning, that a lot of effort goes in operational energy optimization, and that is what high performance looks like when we do. And then we overlay this on the typical project management metrics of schedule, scope, cost, profit, planet, and people all coming together. It will, the entire intersection will give us those solutions if we put it together. Let's look at this, something very, very important, that 80s, 90s, 2000s, 10, 20, 24. How the entire evolution happened for the buildings. Like initially we were pre-80s, we were only unconditioned low energy use buildings. Then in post 80s, the era of punched window buildings, decentralized cooling, medium energy use started. But this is where actually the major jump happened. Our floor space just trebled. Our operations also trebled because we started using 3 shifts. There were many call centers which started operations in 2000s, and our energy just exploded. And that produced a lot of carbon. But the future building stock cannot operate in that fashion. We all need to understand that it has to be high performance, innovative cooling, low energy use, high service level, adaptive comfort, and medium cost. So that is how the entire building evolution sector is aiming towards. Let's look at the stories over here. This I'll come back to the last, that in one slide, if I was to sum up your actions which you need to take towards decarbonizing your entire building, this could be the one slide, but this has got a lot of numbers in it. Let me just put it at the very end. Yes, just quickly now, just 5 minutes. This is the story about high risk taking in a highly process building use. So this is the pilot plants where all the soap, shampoos, a global R&D center, not only Indian products, but across the world products are tested in this pilot labs over here in the Unilever R&D center. One of the 6 globally located R&D centers across the globe. So it is of very high importance in the Unilever hierarchy. High risk taking, why? Because if you see the entire red zone over here, this is 40% of the energy demand has been reduced on day one. How? Operating a mixed mode building. There is no demand for central air conditioning inside the building. It is only the process requirements which give air conditioning, and everything else is about comfort at the adaptive level. So 40% of the HVAC demand has been shaved off on day one. So this is the playbook which you have to use in your consulting assignments also. Let's look at this further. Multiple levels. So huge effective use of public spaces, corridors, open verandas, trees getting integrated within the building. This is the garden story about this project. Let's look at this. Let's go ahead. Yeah, across 3 levels, ground 1 and 2. I showed you a future evolution of buildings, low rise, low WWR, and very high energy optimization. This is the same principle which we observed when we collated and joined all the dots together. Imagine how the building fabric is getting impacted with this picture. The entire building has been cut off with a huge kind of a campus-like feel over here, and see the microclimate improvement, how they've achieved it. Now, how will the air conditioning loads not get optimized because of the fabric improvement over here? You can clearly see it, that everything is cut off and the building envelope is right up. Everything is in a shaded zone and no energy consumption can get wasted in such a building. Ample daylight and water body included inside the natural environment, naturally ventilated space. No amount of glare coming in, perfect daylight, no use of any electricity, of during the entire daytime operations, and this is how you need to do it. A natural flow with microclimate controlled growth in the verandas. All this will improve the building passive design features. 4 to 5 degrees busy Whitefield Road outside and 4 to 5 degrees lower right away inside because of the design. So this is the impact the design can create in the decarbonization effort. Again, lot of areas for interaction. We always talk about health and well-being. So it's not only about creating health and well-being through a rating system. This is what is required. A health and well-being setup, an environment, how it looks like, feels like, you create that and show it to the world. Again, a very bird's eye view of the entire campus. Such a well-defined low window to wall ratio. Corridors are shaded. The entire building envelope mass is cut off because of the outside microclimate improvement. What this actually led to, what we are trying to do is, when we went into the building, the Unilever's story didn't evolve. When we started looking at the energy numbers and we started putting everything to come into decarbonization perspective, we realized what are the reasons that why this building is performing at a super high performance level. So this is how we discovered the entire story over a 5-year period. So every bit of it, green roofs, daylight corridors, naturally ventilated, 40 to 45% reduction in energy demand. So these are all the efforts which campuses need to put in. Let's look at the numbers. These just don't actually make sense over here, but just want to tell you that they already had around 21 to 79 ratio of their on-site, off-site. So lot of the energy, because of Bangalore being a favorable city which allows off-site wheeling, it was already in place. So making it net zero was no big challenge for us. The only thing which we drove was year on year. As rightly said by the earlier speaker, Unilever is one of the biggest spenders on sustainability initiatives year after year. And that is what we've seen right from automation, measurement verification to the latest chiller upgrades. Everything comes every year over here. Yes, we did a standard design versus a proposed design. And what we found is that the EPI number of this building is something which was, we are talking about this number now, but this number existed in 2016-17 when we started the project. I will come to that number. Yes, it is having a good comfort zone also. We thought that perhaps air conditioning is not there, so they might have actually reduced the comfort hours, but that was not the case. Everything, all parameters were being met over here. Now, last thing which I want to show you is, what were the success steps over here? Let's look at that. Yeah, this is the success story of Unilever. You focus over here now. If you see in India, if you take a typical box building, it will be actually at 280 to 230 kilowatt hours meter square per year. This is a typical scenario in India box buildings. I'm not talking about certified or not certified. We didn't get into that because we didn't believe that certified buildings may be at lower numbers. So what we felt is, let's look at the numbers and put it over here. ECBC compliant buildings are supposed to be at 125 to 150 during the star rating era of the ECBC buildings. 4-star rating was around 120. So that is where the ECBC compliance lies. Now, low energy demand was only the exclusive 5-star buildings, 100 to 125 or below 100. But for the climate type, a composite climate type in Bangalore, what we realized is that best in class will operate at 50, which is, imagine, 50%, 100% less than the highest rated building. So that is what the best in class looks like. And when we finished off with all the interventions and we put the entire story together, we saw that this building, in spite of having process loads of R&D, it is operating at 40 units per square meter. Now imagine the net zero acceleration plan just rises exponentially because of this low EPI consumption inside the building. So this is what the playbook should look like. As soon as the buildings are built, bring it to lower EPI immediately using only passive design measures, adaptive comfort, mixed mode mixed or hybrid kind of ventilation cooling requirements, and you will see the benefits. This is another lighthouse project. The assessment certificate and the global net zero action plan has been put in place. This is again a lighthouse project. Why? Because it aims to be the first vendor in India who operates a smart factory. What is smart? 4.0 version of a operations, a manufacturing unit in the fit out industry, because it is related to the built environment. That was the driver which drove us to take up and inspire ANJ to start looking at decarbonization at their entire, not only at their factory level, but at their larger level. Now, what has happened is, and why GNFZ, that I would like to add. What we found is, in the fit out and design industry, there are some major challenges which are being thrown open by the global corporates who are entering India. Now, global corporates want these guys, even if to qualify, they have to state, have you done an assessment study of your own carbon reduction plan? Have you committed to SBTi? Have you put down any global 6 rankings they have given? Are you qualified? What is your score on that matrix? Can you give us? If you have answers to that, then only you come to us to ask for the RFP, otherwise don't come. So these are the kind of guidelines which are coming in the fit out industry. And that is why it is imperative that everybody, right from the starting ecosystem partners who design and build to the value chain below who are downstream, everybody has to get involved in this entire assessment system and start looking at their numbers, at least for the baseline inventorization. So that is where we could easily give it to ANJ that, boss, you cannot survive tomorrow because of these changes coming in your sector. So why don't you become the first mover? And that is why the early adoption has started over here. And we aim to do this across corporates. So we have Mahindra as the leaders over here. We did the entire work together. The first net zero residential was done with Sunita ji's help and us partnering. We've now taken a triple bottom line, triple net zero volume program with Mahindra, Club Mahindra Resorts across their pan-India portfolio. So this is the way the world is evolving. It's high time that each one of us can look at this in a very serious and committed way and take the journey to the next level. Thank you.